The escape. The gunshot had barely finished echoing before my grandfather understood what had just happened. There was no taking it back, no explaining it away, and no second chances. He stood frozen for only a heartbeat, staring at the sheriff lying motionless on the ground. The Sunday afternoon that had begun with hymns and prayer had ended in tragedy. Granddaddy Bear looked at my grandmother. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The fear in their eyes said everything. He knew what would happen next. A black man had just shot the sheriff in rural Alabama. Justice would not wait for his side of the story. He had only one chance. He had to leave. Immediately. Without another word, Granddaddy Bear turned and hurried toward the house. His footsteps pounded across the porch as he pushed open the front door. His heart hammered against his chest. Every second mattered. Inside, he moved quickly from room to room. His hands trembled as he gathered a few clothes, a Bible, a blanket, whatever little food they had. He wasn't packing for a trip. He was packing for a life he never imagined he'd have to live. Behind him, my grandmother stood quietly in the doorway. Tears streamed down her face. She wanted to stop him. She wanted to hold him. She wanted to believe everything would somehow be all right. But deep inside, they both knew better. She finally found her voice.
Bear.
He stopped. Slowly, he turned around. Their eyes met. For what felt like forever, neither one spoke. Finally, she whispered the only words her heart could manage.
Please, be careful.
Granddaddy Bear walked back toward her. He gently placed both hands on her shoulders. His eyes were filled with tears.
I don't know when I'll see you again.
His voice cracked.
But babe, I'll always love you.
She reached for his hand and held it tightly, as if refusing to let go might somehow stop time.
God will watch over you.
He nodded.
I'm going to trust him every step of the way.
And with one last embrace, he walked out the front door and never looked back. The road ahead held nothing but uncertainty. Every passing wagon, every approaching automobile, and every unfamiliar face made him wonder if someone had recognized him, if someone had already heard, and if someone was coming. Hour after hour, he kept moving. Eventually, his journey led him to a small farming community called Redland in Elmore County, Alabama. It was quiet, peaceful, far enough away that no one knew the story he was trying so desperately to leave behind. There he found work on the farm owned by Mr. Aubrey. The work was hard. From sunrise to sunset, plowing fields, picking crops, to repairing fences. Anything that needed doing. Granddaddy Bear welcomed every aching muscle. Hard work gave him something he desperately needed. It gave his mind somewhere to rest. The endless rows of cotton fields, the smell of freshly turned soil, and the steady rhythm of farm life. It became a refuge from the memories that refused to leave him. But no matter how far he traveled, he could never outrun the past. Every unexpected knock at the door made his heart race. Every unfamiliar horse or automobile pulling into the yard caused him to stop whatever he was doing. And every stranger made him wonder, have they come for me? Even in the quietest moments, the memory of that Sunday afternoon lingered. He had escaped Fort Deposit, but the weight of that day traveled with him. Looking back now, I often think about the burden my grandfather carried. Most people saw a hard-working farmhand trying to build a new life. They never saw the sleepless nights, the silent prayers, or the fear that walked beside him every single day. Still, he kept working. He kept believing. And somewhere in those Alabama fields, God quietly began planting the seeds of a future my grandfather could never have imagined. One that would eventually lead to the birth of my father, who married my mother, and a few years later had me. His name. Mr. Aubrey stood quietly for a moment before speaking again. His eyes rested on me as I lay peacefully in my mother's arms. Then he looked toward my grandmother.
You know,
He paused, as if weighing every word.
I really liked Albert. He was a good man.
My grandmother slowly nodded. No one in the room questioned that. Around Redland, my grandfather had earned the respect of everyone who knew him. Mr. Aubrey folded his hands behind his back.
It's a shame none of Albert's boys ever carried on his name.
He looked back at my mother, then at my grandmother. Finally, he spoke the words that would change my life forever.
You know, I think you ought to change this baby's name and name him Albert.
The room fell completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the faint creaking of the old wooden floor beneath Mr. Aubrey's boots. Years later, my grandmother told me she never forgot that moment. Whenever she shared the story, she could still remember exactly how she felt. She looked at me and said,
Bill.
She smiled softly.
When Mr. Aubrey spoke those words, it felt like the whole room stopped breathing.
She glanced toward my mother.
Your mama and I looked at each other.
She shook her head.
Neither one of us knew what to say.
Then, almost at the same time, they answered.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Aubrey smiled with quiet satisfaction. He gave a slight nod. Without another word, he turned, walked out the front door, and disappeared down the porch steps. Neither woman moved. They simply stood there listening as his footsteps faded farther and farther away. Only after he was gone did either of them speak. My grandmother slowly lowered herself into a chair. My mother looked down at me, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Neither of them had expected a simple visit to end with someone else deciding what I should be called. Looking back now, I often wonder what must have been going through Russell's mind. I can almost hear the conversation he never spoke aloud.
The child already ain't mine.
A long silence.
And now this?
Another pause.
Do y'all actually expect me to give him my own father's name?
I cannot begin to imagine how deeply that must have hurt him. It wasn't simply about a name. It was another reminder of everything he had already lost. The very next day, my parents quietly traveled to have my name legally changed. They told no one in the neighborhood. There was no celebration, no family gathering, and no announcement. The change happened almost in secret. Even though my legal name became Albert, the people who had known me since birth continued calling me Bill or Billy Joe. Those names stayed with me throughout my childhood. In many ways, I grew up carrying both names, one given to me at birth, the other carrying the memory of a grandfather I would never have the chance to know. As the years passed, life inside our home only became more difficult. My grandmother often spoke about the abuse my mother endured from Russell. The pain that had begun long before I was born never truly disappeared. Instead, it slowly pulled their marriage apart. A few years later, their relationship finally came to an end in divorce. Looking back now, I realize that a name can carry far more than letters. Sometimes it carries history. It carries sacrifice. It carries pain. And sometimes it carries the legacy of someone whose life continues to shape generations long after they're gone. Russell's life. As I grew older, I found myself thinking about Russell more often. Not because I wanted to relive the painful parts of my childhood, but because I wanted to understand the man behind them. For a long time, I saw him only through the eyes of a little boy. Later, I began seeing him through the eyes of a man. Those are two very different perspectives. The older I became, the more I realized Russell wasn't born knowing how to be a husband. He wasn't born knowing how to be a father. He was shaped by the world around him. Looking back now, I believe he was one of many men from his generation who simply repeated what they had seen growing up. No one taught them how to talk through pain. No one encouraged them to express fear. And no one explained that strength could be found in kindness instead of anger. Instead, many men believed their responsibility ended when they earned a paycheck and put food on the table. After long days of hard labor, they gathered together. They laughed. They played cards. They drank. They swapped stories. Sometimes they stayed out until late into the night. That was simply the culture many of them lived in. The conversations rarely centered on being better husbands or becoming more involved fathers. Instead, toughness was admired. Silence was expected. And too often, anger became the language many families learned to live with. Looking back, I don't believe Russell ever learned another way. That doesn't excuse the choices he made, but it does help explain some of them. The abuse my mother endured left scars that never completely healed. Eventually, their marriage came to an end. When the divorce was final, Russell remained around Fort Deposit for several years before moving north to Ohio. To many people, it probably looked like he was starting over. He remarried. He and his new wife welcomed 2 children into the world. On the surface, it appeared that life had given him another opportunity. I truly wish that had been the ending to his story. But sometimes, changing your address doesn't change the pain you carry inside. The wounds Russell never dealt with followed him to Ohio. Little by little, the same destructive behaviors that had damaged his first marriage began appearing in his second. Arguments became more frequent. The home grew more tense. Fear slowly replaced peace. As time passed, his second wife became emotionally exhausted. Eventually, she found comfort in another man. Whether she was searching for kindness, understanding, or simply a place where she no longer lived in fear, I cannot say. I only know what happened next forever changed several lives. When Russell discovered the affair, his anger exploded. In a moment that could never be undone, he confronted them. Then tragedy struck. 2 lives were lost, and in a matter of moments, Russell destroyed what remained of his own. He was arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. Whenever I think about his life, I don't find myself asking how one terrible decision could happen. Instead, I find myself wondering how many smaller decisions, ignored hurts, unspoken pain, and unresolved anger built toward that terrible day. His story has become a lifelong reminder to me that pain left untreated rarely disappears. It often grows, and if we're not careful, it can reach far beyond us, touching the lives of everyone we love. Looking back now, I carry both sadness and compassion in my heart. Sadness for the lives that were forever changed. Compassion for a man who never seemed to learn a healthier way to carry the burdens he bore. His life taught me one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. Unhealed pain doesn't stay buried. Sooner or later, it demands to be heard.